We were lied to. We were promised that the new showrunner at the helm of Halo Season 2 had more reverence for the source material than what was shown in Season 1. We were promised that the events of this second season would track much more closely with those of the game canon. And we were promised by those privileged early reviewers that Season 2 was much better than Season 1.
So that was a fucking lie.
Season 2 is not any better than Season 1. In a number of ways, it's actually worse than Season 1. Halo Season 2 was a largely boring affair, bereft of meaningful action and dragged down to a crawl by uninteresting storylines focused on third-rate characters. It did nothing to fix the main problems from its freshman season, and even strayed further from the spirit of the source material, as well as continuing to unravel the iconic hero Master Chief. In the end, the creative team failed to turn this series around and managed to give us a definitively worse version of the Halo story. So why were we sold the lie that Season 2 was better than Season 1? Well, reviewers only having access to the first 4 episodes certainly played a role, although proclaiming the season as significantly better when only a quarter of those first 4 episodes were even decent seems like a stretch. And of course, the perpetuation of access journalism is still a thing. And the paid PR puff pieces masquerading as reviews and articles and social media posts designed to get viewers to return or to change people's perception of how the show is being received pop up all too often as well. We may never know exactly what was fueling the false hype train before the season, but the end result is the same, as we the fans are left with yet another crappy season of Halo that's further harmed the underlying franchise. And now that Season 2 is in the books, it's time to look back on the good and the bad of Halo's sophomore season and figure out where exactly things went so wrong with this show. So here's your spoiler warning before we dive right into the nitty-shitty of Halo Season 2. We're starting off with the good, and I'll be upfront about this. This is going to be a short section. And that's because Halo Season 2 simply didn't get very much right, so there's not a lot to cover here. Kicking things off with the most surface-level aspect worthy of praise, Halo generally looks good. Outside of a few instances of wonky CGI, most everything else was pretty decent. Most of the sets looked good and looked like they belong in the Halo universe. The props, the weapons, and particularly the Spartan's Mjolnir armor, it all fit the bill, and it's definitely head and shoulders above almost every other aspect of the show. Now, it's obvious that this show was not given a very big budget, so the sets were never going to rival those of Dune, and the costuming was never going to keep pace with something like House of the Dragon. But for what they seemingly had to work with, they did a great job in this regard. Probably where the production crew most felt the restraints of that small budget was in terms of the action, which likely explains why this season had such little of it. But when they did find enough cash to put together action scenes, they did great in this area as well. And while, thanks to the budget, most of the action came down to small-scale skirmishes pitched in tight hallways, they at least tried to be somewhat imaginative in their fight choreography. It went well beyond the basic attack actions you'd find in the games. They played around with what someone like Master Chief could really do with his arsenal when not constrained by pre-programmed combat animations. And when they likely blew most of their small budget on the Fall of Reach episode, they managed to produce their best episode of the season. Now, this is largely because most of the other problems with the show were shoved into the background for an hour, while shell casings and plasma zipped through the air, but still, the episode shows us that the action the show was able to produce was not a weak point this season. And the last potentially positive aspect of this season is more of a case of addition by subtraction. Of course, we're talking about Master Chief's relationship with Cortana. Now, obviously, after Cortana was removed from Master Chief's system off-screen before the events of Season 2, she and Chief had very little interaction throughout the course of this season. But when we get down to it, isn't no relationship between the two characters better than the utterly shitty relationship they had in Season 1? I mean, the way Chief treated Cortana was a straight slap to the face to anyone who enjoyed their close bond in the games.
Cortana.
Yes, Chief?
I need you to do me a favor.
Anything.
Stop talking.
In our book, we preferred them not even interacting this season over whatever the hell the first season did to them. And that about does it for everything Halo did right in its second season. Which means it's time to dive off the deep end into the black and swirling waters of everything Halo did wrong this season. Let's start with the biggest and broadest problem this show has, the death knell of any show, which is of course bad writing. All the action and badassery and pretty lights in the galaxy can't make up for a crappy story. And Halo Season 2 had crappy stories in spades. And it doesn't end there. Those crappy storylines, usually centered on uninteresting characters who should be little more than part of the background, featured plenty of instances of cringe-inducing dialogue and eye-rolling attempts at forcing all this weight and gravitas upon themes that weren't working at all. Like the mother-flippin' idea that Master Chief puts a ton of stock into his ability to predict coin flips. And the notion that he would flip an American quarter from 500 plus years in the past to decide whether or not to help a fellow Spartan in need like he's Two-Face. It was a bafflingly stupid theme that the show would not stop trying to push. But in terms of the damage each aspect of the poor writing did to Halo Season 2, the extraneous storylines featuring lame, third-tier characters with little to no relevance to the overarching story far outpace any other problem. No one cares about Riz's failing body and her training fatigue, or watching her retire to live with some tribe of space Amish on planet Shithole. Stronghand's wife, whose name I refuse to learn because somebody needs to treat her with the irrelevance she deserves, should hardly get lines, much less a full-blown subplot. And Quan is a horrible, dumb character who will only ever be involved in horrible, dumb storylines as a result. Her Vision Quest bullshit came entirely out of nowhere, got more and more vague as it dragged on episode after episode, and in the end, we don't have the slightest idea what it's even about, much less about where it's heading. Vanek's corpse had a better character arc than Quan, and her character should have been killed off or exiled at the start of the season if the new creators were serious about improving this show. And we haven't even discussed the incredible villains yet, both of whom were human, by the way. At a time when the Covenant has just wiped out humanity's second largest planet, and we need our greatest hero to fight off this alien threat, this show thought it would be cooler for Master Chief to spend his time fighting back against his superior officers. A sniveling 120-pound man and a portly aging woman who should invest in an on-site translator. It's not lost on us that having human antagonists helps us viewers see more depth to the villains more easily than you can with a brutish, hulking alien. But forcing Master Chief, humanity's greatest genetically engineered super soldier known for his hyper-focus and following orders, to turn his sights on his own commanding officers undercuts the very core of what the iconic game character stood for. And that criticism is just a tangent. The real issue with these horribly weak villains was how their stories ended by the time the finale's credits rolled. Parangoski gets chewed up by zombies by happenstance, and Ackerson never really faced any justice for his actions, and doesn't look poised to either. When Master Chief finally came face to face with Ackerson, the latter immediately crumpled under the weight of the former's grip. And Chief managed to overcome Parangoski by simply ignoring her commands. Imagine that. So thanks to these weak villains, and how little of a threat they actually posed, and how easily they got taken down, there was nothing for our heroes to triumph over, and no real satisfaction to be had at the end of their storylines. And that's just a microcosm of the larger problem. By the end of the season, it's hard to argue that a single one of these many storylines had a satisfying resolution. In fact, most of them had no resolution at all, and were hardly coherent on their own by the end. At their best, these storylines and subplots were mediocre, and at their worst, they were painful, grueling stretches to get through. And yet, many of these subplots were given equal or more time than the actual main story of the second season. So even if this alternate timeline of events where Master Cheeks and Tits Makee reached the Jimmy Ring Hoop had somehow been a decent story, it still would have been dragged down and drowned out by all the other shitty storylines. No series can thrive with poor writing, and Halo is no exception. Now, something that Halo should be excelling at, you would assume, would be its action scenes. And as already mentioned, when there is action, it's pretty good. But throughout the course of the season, those kinds of scenes are few and far between. And when it comes to meaningful action, the kind of action scenes that advance the main story, bring conflicts to a head, and change the course of the narrative, it was almost non-existent. And as a result, for a show based on an action-packed game all about saving the universe, there sure is a lot of talking. It would be one thing if it was the kind of talking that's well-written, heavy with political intrigue, and involving deeply interesting characters like House of the Dragon. But this is just empty dialogue in service to a lame storyline delivered by irrelevant and unlikable characters. Sure, they found ways to sprinkle in thrilling action like Quan running away from guys in a marketplace, Soren beating up some dudes, and Perez's training simulations that didn't even happen. But very little of the action we actually got served the main plot, so it all ends up just being a sideshow to distract the viewer from how plotting and uneventful the main storyline is. But the last major problem with the Halo TV series is the most damaging and the most unforgivable, as it's been the main driving force behind pushing actual Halo fans out of the picture entirely. And that, of course, is how the show has handled Master Chief and the established lore of the Halo universe. You know, it's easy to mock people like us for criticizing Master Chief being unmasked and out of his armor for the majority of this season, and for the whole series for that matter. And that's because stupid people see this as just a surface-level visual criticism of the show, something that just detracts from the visual spectacle of the show. But in reality, mocking the series for how often Master Chief takes off his helmet, for example, is just a boiled-down, distilled way of addressing the underlying problems that this exemplifies. It's an unmistakable sign that this Master Chief is not the Master Chief of the games. You know, the Master Chief people liked enough to buy all of his crap and support the franchise long enough for them to make a live-action TV show that then turns around, drops trow, and shits all over those longtime supporting fans. The ones that kept the franchise alive all these years with their time and their money and made it popular enough for some amateur-level creators to come in and bastardize into a D-tier generic sci-fi chosen one space turd. In this way and many others, Master Chief is just fundamentally different than his game counterpart, and not just different, but worse. His exploration of his newfound feelings and emotions has slowed the main storyline to a grinding pace. His lack of a relationship with Cortana sees him just spilling his soul out to anyone in earshot, and his search for purpose just leads to him trying to find meaning in stupid places like his ability to flip a coin. And then you have a character like Makee, whose very existence as a human with any degree of authority over the Covenant is laughable on the face of it. And by the way, how is she alive again? Oh, you're not going to even try and explain it? Cool, we don't care anyway. Just as you creators obviously don't care either. And people will say, well, if you want the story from the games, just go play the games. But we don't ask for a one-for-one retelling of the game's story. Fans would be thrilled to experience some new Master Chief adventure that hasn't been documented in the games, just as long as it's actually Master Chief, and the story doesn't feature glaring contradictions of the existing lore. But instead, we get the chosen one, Master Cheeks, and his search for the fabled space ring of destiny. It's a double whammy in the end, as the Halo show erases a beloved iconic character as it overwrites a legendary video game story. So instead of telling fans to go play the game if they want that story, how about you tell the fucking creators to create their own franchise? They chose to lazily jam their crappy sci-fi fiction into the Halo skin suit and abuse the brand for free viewership and cheap publicity, so you're pointing the finger at the wrong people. And we'll leave it at that. Naturally, because we have eyes and ears and brains, we're giving the show a HateWatch designation, and saying Halo Season 2 is worth only your mockery and derision, and definitely not worth your time or money. Now, the viewership numbers so far for the show are not impressive. By the 4th Halo episode, the show is hardly beating out a mid-tier Amazon Prime show that had been concluded for 2 weeks by this point. And this is at a time when there's no real competition on TV. So it looks like most people grabbed what was left of their dignity and tuned out. And who could blame them? We were lied to. We were fed a false promise that the new showrunner had the appropriate appreciation of the source material to respectfully adapt it into a faithful TV show. Early reviewers told us it was markedly better than the first season. But where it counts, Season 2 was just as bad as Season 1. It might be slightly better in a few minor areas, but it's arguably worse in more areas. How they ended Season 1 of this show was a big impetus for starting this channel. As we covered in our How They Tried to Trick Us video, we wanted to make it clear that we felt that them ending the season with Master Chief connecting with Cortana, which would presumably leave him as more of the hyper-focused, hyper-capable super soldier we know from the games, was just a low-down dirty trick to get fans to return for the second season in hopes of seeing the iconic hero they know and love. And in retrospect, we were spot on. Cortana was removed from Master Chief off-screen, and the Master Chief of Season 2 wasn't any closer to his game counterpart. But it looks like they're trying to pull another round of tricks with Season 2 now, promising the introduction of Forerunner facilities, the arrival of the Flood, further adventures on the titular Halo, and leading into the actual events of the games. Guilty Spark will even be here to show us around, and maybe we can find out what happened to Makee together. Just make sure to renew your subscription for Season 3, where we promise things will be better. As of this writing, Halo has not been renewed for another season. Do you think Halo will get a Season 3? Do you think it deserves a Season 3? Is there realistically anything it can do to change people's opinions about the show at this point? Would you watch a Groundhog's Day style spin-off show where Quan finds new, horrible ways to die every day? Let us know in the comments below. Remember to stay tuned to the channel for a video of the funniest clips and scenes from HateWatchers' recounting of events from Season 2. Also remember to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for clapping these master cheeks with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.